that it is a form of the Catholic religion, the Catholicism, that it's a form of the Muslim religion, that it would be a form of some cult group that rose up somewhere. The system that it describes is one that literally envelops the world. It is one that most people have bought into. It is describing her as a harlot because it says that she has caused the kings to commit adultery with her, that she has caused the church itself and even the saints of God to enter into these adulterous relationships with her. She's described as possessing everything that our soul lusts or desires after. And again, that does not fit the criteria of any church or religion that we can actually describe. This is pointing out a system, one that started out in Babylon, one that literally controls the financial aspects of all life. In fact, when Antichrist comes during the tribulation, one of his goals is to control the monetary system as well as the policy. Now, if you turn your Bibles also to 2 Thessalonians, let's read real quick, because we're going to talk about something here. Second Thessalonians, verse number 2, because we need to point out part of the mission of the church. Starts out in 2 Thessalonians, 2nd chapter. You all there? It says, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there be a falling away first, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition," speaking of the Antichrist, "who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he's God. Remember you not when I was with you, I told you these things? And now you already know, and now you know what withholds him, that it might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity does already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. Then the wicked one shall be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and destroy him with the brightness of his coming. Even him who's coming after the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, with all deceivableness, unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved." We'll stop there. Verse number 4 speaks of the Antichrist. He speaks of that one who comes, who exposes himself to the people, and he manifests himself, or he portrays himself as God. Verse 5, Paul says, "Remember when I was with you, I told you about these things." Verse 6, "And now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time." So in verse 6, we're being told that something is actually holding back the Antichrist. There is something that is holding him back before he comes. Verse 7, "The mystery of iniquity," literally speaking of the evil, does already work. So Paul is saying, even during his writing to the Thessalonians, that the things that are building toward the manifestation of Antichrist, they're already set in motion. Do you understand that from the moment God uttered his prophecy in Genesis, the 2nd chapter, when he said, "Because you have done this thing," when Adam and Eve fell, by the time we get to that 3rd chapter and God starts speaking, what does he say? He says, "Because you've done this thing," he says to the man and the woman, "because you've done this thing, you're going to die," speaking spiritually. But then when he speaks to the devil, he says, "On your belly you'll crawl." He tells the devil, "There's coming one of the seed of a woman who will bruise your head, and in the process, he'll bruise his heel," speaking of Jesus. From the moment that prophecy was uttered, the devil began a system, and we've talked about this. God established a system that's his, and the devil established that counterfeit, that false religious system. Unfortunately for us, the church, we're stuck right here in the middle. The spirit of this world always trying to drive us this way, coming back to God's system, swinging back as people forget, or let go, let it slip. The Thessalonian letter makes it plain. Verse 6, "You know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time." He's saying to them, you know what's holding the Antichrist back. But when you look at that 7th verse, "For the mystery of iniquity already does work." So Paul is saying that that power of evil that will ultimately manifest itself in the Antichrist, he says it's already at work now when he's writing. It's already working now. The spirit of Antichrist is already at work right now. Now, in the 6th verse, what did he say? You know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. What is it that withholds, or literally, this is not a good word, let's call it, what holds back this evil or the Antichrist? It's the church. So the role of the church, Timothy tells us it's a pillar and ground of truth, a lighthouse, but another role of the church is to literally oppose and withhold or hold back Antichrist. So as Antichrist and his system desire to literally establish an agenda, establish a beachhead in our community, especially in the church has a job, an obligation literally to oppose, withhold, and hold back this mystery, this iniquity, this literal evil that the devil unleashed from the moment God said to him, there's coming one of the seed of a woman, literally a virgin birth, because a woman has no seed of herself. So God up front in the 3rd chapter of Genesis says to the devil, there's coming one of the seed of a woman. There's going to be a virgin birth. He's going to bruise your head. In the process, he'll bruise his heel. Speaking of Jesus being smitten while defeating the devil. From the time this prophecy went forth, the devil set out to establish many counterfeits. So this evil began. Verse 7. The mystery of iniquity does already work. Only he who now letteth, and that word letteth literally means to hold back. What is holding back, or what is supposed to hold back the Antichrist, or this evil, this iniquity? It's the church. For the mystery of iniquity does already work. Only he who now letteth will let, or keep withholding, until he's taken out of the way. So, until the church gets taken out of the way, what is one of its primary jobs? To oppose, to withhold, to hinder Antichrist from achieving or laying out his agenda of deceiving the nations. Or at least of laying out and literally enveloping the world with his false religion, false system of policy, the false ideas. Good example is the notion of fairness. How many times have you had to tell your kids, there's no such thing as fair? Kids always say, that's not fair. There's no such thing as fair. There's no such thing as fair. God put Adam in the garden. Did God know the devil was there? Yeah, he knew he was there. That's why the earth was dark and void. Did he know the devil was there? Huh? Had the devil had experience with God's creation prior? Huh? Yeah. So was it fair to put Adam there with a devil that had experience with the creation of God? Was that fair? I don't think it's fair. But there ain't no such thing as fair. When it came time to convert Paul, God blinds him, knocks him down. But that ain't how we got saved, is it? God shows them miracles. We didn't get none. Is that fair? There's no such thing as fairness. So this whole idea of fairness is one of these doctrines that this world, or that the Antichrist wants to lay out and tell everybody that there's some kind of equity with God. Listen, there's no equity with God. The angels have a position that's not equal to yours. There's even different ranks and commands in the angelic hosts. You got these cherubims. You've got these archangels. Genesis 6 talks about these sons of God. You've got these seraphim. You've got all different kinds of angels. There's no equity in God. His creation, he makes man. Among his creation, he says man's going to have dominion over all these things. We're not talking fairness. We're talking God's choice. Now, here's what he says, verse 7. The mystery of iniquity does already work, only he who now letteth, or hinders, or withholds, will withhold until he be taken out of the way. So the role of the church is literally to oppose, withhold, and hinder the Antichrist from establishing his beachhead or his agenda in this world until it's time. Right? And this has been my contention with the church. How come it isn't fighting? How come it's not withholding? Huh? You really think the Antichrist is so unsophisticated that the only thing he's got going for him is Marilyn Manson? Huh? Rap music? Hollywood movies? Huh? Styles of clothes? You think the devil is so unsophisticated that that's his only approach to establishing the rule of the Antichrist? How come the church doesn't withhold anymore? For that matter, what has the church withheld lately? Huh? Think about it. The church is supposed to withhold, oppose, and stop Antichrist from executing his policy. Now listen, here's what this means. The Thessalonian letter says that this spirit or this mystery of iniquity, this evil plot, the church is supposed to be withholding it till he gets taken out of the way. Then it all happens. This evil just happened overnight. What has the church withheld lately? Huh? Think about it. Church hadn't withheld anything. Why? Verse 8, and then the wicked one will be revealed. Now this is talking about the future. You got the church age, the rapture or the catching away of the church occurs here. 7 years of tribulation. Then you've got the 1,000-year reign of Christ, the millennium. But nonetheless, it's at this point, the catching up of the church, that force which withholds Antichrist gets removed or taken out of the way. So up till this point here, where the church gets taken, that verse of Scripture that Paul speaks about when he says, we will not all die, we'll not all sleep, but in a moment of the twinkling of an eye, we'll all be caught up, we'll be with the Lord. The catching up of the church is going to occur. And at that point, now we're going to enter into that dispensation that we know as the 7-year tribulation, that portion of time God owes the Jews. But up till that happening, what are we supposed to be doing? Withholding Antichrist. Now, again, I'm just going to ask the rhetorical question. What has the church withheld in the last 100 years? Huh? The tithe. I'm sure that's true. But what has the church withheld? Everything that the Antichrist wants to lay out seems to just unfold in front of us. And the church doesn't do anything. It's almost like having a dog that don't bark. Huh? It's like buying a dog and somebody says it's for protection and the burglar comes in, the dog doesn't make any noise. If the job of the church is to withhold, to hinder, to restrict the Antichrist from establishing his policy, this iniquity, where's the church? And that's what I get sick of the church, when it thinks it's withholding Antichrist because it's beating up on music, or because it beats up on movies, or because it beats up on some other form of entertainment. Now, we've been reading quite a few things. Reading about this Frankfurt school that left Germany because when Adolf Hitler took power, being literally Jewish, Englishmen, they basically couldn't stay. It was going to be incompatible. So basically what they did was they moved to Columbia, New York, Columbia University, where they figured, hey, we'll just keep our philosophy alive. We'll keep our philosophy going. We're just going to have to find a new class of people that need to rise up against the lords, those who have power. And they found such a proletariat group in minorities, homosexuals, victims, women, children. They got themselves a new group of people to preach to. And I told you before, the thing about these people is that they understood that you take an idea or you take a philosophy and you preach it long enough, even understanding the idea that you are going to die, not seeing the promise, knowing that down the road you're going to create that which you designed. They understand this better than the church, because everything they established back here in the 40s has come to pass. Now somebody tell me that the church can equal that record. Huh? So where's the bite in the church? Where's the bark? I'm just saying. I'm just bringing up some points. So, Teletubbies, that's about all they got to preach on. For the cultural Marxists, no cause ranked higher than the abolition of the family. Remember, we were talking about this. The abolition of the family, literally, they wanted to get rid of that symbol of fascism, the father. Isn't that terrible? Let me ask you a question. These people back in the 40s said, if you're a married woman, if you have children in a house with a man, you are literally the seedbed of fascism. Isn't that funny they said that back then? And today, everything you see on television hates fathers. Everything you see on the movie screen hates fathers. I don't need to tell you the legislation all goes against fathers. Huh? When it comes to divorce and visitation. Can you imagine they laid this out in the 40s and it's all coming to pass? All right. To decapitate the family of the father as its head, the Frankfurt School advocated alternatives like matriarchy, where the mother rules the roost. Isn't that funny? They come up with these ideas. You know, one of the problems that we have in minority households is guess who rules the roost? Huh? This is why you can't preach certain things in certain churches, huh, Whitney? Mama rules the roost. And the androgyny theory. You know, androgyny means that there's no sex roles. In other words, a man, his roles are only defined by culture, not by nature. So they're saying that men and women, their roles are interchangeable. So a man can do what a woman can, and a woman can do what a man can. Huh? I'll tell you what, a man can't breastfeed a baby. Huh? Can't happen. Huh? They want androgyny, man, but they don't have women's bathrooms with only urinals, do they? See, they want the man to sit down. They came up with the idea of androgyny. Now listen, I'm not playing with you. These theories, they laid them out philosophically in the 40s, understanding that they would come to pass later. Now how come the church didn't say anything? In fact, I'll tell you, I'll go a step further. You know why the church didn't say anything? Because the church jumped on board. That's why preachers are afraid to say the things the Bible say, because they don't want to step on the toes of all those ladies. Like when you read the Bible and you find out who was following Jesus, he had his disciples, but you know who followed him around was all the women. You know the reason he had a treasurer named Judas was because the women supported that ministry. When it came time to have a little Bible study in the house, who was the ones doing the work? Huh? Yeah. All right. They want the androgyny theory, where male and female roles are interchangeable. That's why they tell men, go ahead and push the buggy, honey. Here, hold my purse. And you see the fellow walking through Mervyn's with the purse. Ain't nothing worse. And then that guy says, my masculinity isn't challenged by this. Try that in West Hollywood and we'll find out. Huh? Huh? Walk through West Hollywood with a handbag. We'll find out if your masculinity's challenged. Huh? Charles knows about that. You work out in a gym, man, you put 4 plates on the rack and start doing anything with it, people stop and look at you. Till you find out they're wearing leg warmers and dolphin shorts. Huh? Suddenly, what you're looking at? Huh? Isn't that right? I mean, you put some plates on that bar and you start to do a set, you know half the gym's looking at you, and it don't bother you. Until the fellas got on leg warmers, pink suit, pink Reeboks, and, a cropped T-shirt and plucked eyebrows. You know, suddenly it's, what are you looking at? Huh? Androgyny theory, where male and female roles are interchangeable, even reversed. That's why they got female boxing. They want women in combat, women rabbis, bishops. God is a she. Demi Moore is G.I. Jane, and Rambo like Sigourney Weaver, comforting, terrified, cringing male soldiers. Films that depict women as tough, aggressive, and men as sensitive, vulnerable testify to the success of the Frankfurt School and the feminist revolution it helped to midwife. Now, isn't that funny that every movie we see has this type of theme to it, and where'd it come from? Let me ask you a question. When did you watch a Hollywood movie? When did you ever see a Hollywood movie that was influenced by the church, or that was influenced by the truth of the gospel? When? Even them idiots at Channel 40 can't get a Revelation movie right. Huh? Like Lucas, Wilhelm Reich believed that the way to destroy the family was through the revolutionary sexual practices and early sex education. Now, did you know that sex education was implemented in the school because of these guys? You know, when they started implementing sex education as part of the core curriculum in schools, there was more teenage pregnancy, more venereal disease. See, they don't want to call it what it is. It's not venereal disease anymore. It's just STDs. All right? Huh? Sounds a little more benign. You get STDs now. You don't get VD. VD sounds ugly. Huh? The appearance of sex education in elementary schools in America owes its debt to Lukács, Reich, and the Frankfurt School. In the death of the West, the Frankfurt School must be held as a prime suspect and principal accomplice. The propaganda assault on the family it advocated has contributed to collapse of the family. Nuclear families today represent fewer than 1/4 of U.S. households. Women's liberation from the traditional roles of wife and mother, which the school was among the first to champion, has led to the demeaning and downgrading of those roles in today's American society. Remember, before it was okay for somebody to say, I'm a housewife? Huh? Now you ain't even a housewife. You're a stay-at-home mom. Huh? You don't want to be a housewife. You want to be a stay-at-home mom. What does that mean? See, you don't have to have a husband to be a stay-at-home mom, do you? You can be a lame welfare recipient. You come on television. Hi, what do you do for a living? I'm a stay-at-home mom. You ain't telling them you're on the dole. Huh? Millions of Western women now share the feminist hostility to marriage and motherhood. Now, you know that's true. I marry people where a woman comes and says to me, hey, I like the idea of getting married in the church, but can you not bring up that submit to your husband stuff? Millions have adopted the movement's agenda to have no intention of getting married and no desire to have children. Their embrace of Marcuse's pleasure principle and their tours of duty in the sexual revolution means putting marriages off. As divorce and birth rates slow, even the marriages entered into are less stable and less fruitful. In depopulating the nations of Europe, even the old Catholic countries use contraceptives almost universal. Thus, a tiny band of renegade Marxists did help subvert American culture and begin the deconstruction of our republic. On the tombstone of architect Christopher Wren is written, reader, if it is monument you seek, look around you. So it may be said of Lukács, Grimsky, Adorno, Marcuse, four who made a revolution. We'll skip a page. Orwell said, words are weapons. Traditionalists have yet to discover the effective countermeasures. By calling an enemy a racist or a fascist, you don't need to answer his arguments. He's forced to defend his character. Orwell heard the word fascist used so often he assumed that if Jones calls Smith a fascist, Jones means I hate Smith. But if Jones says I hate Smith, he'd be confessing to unchristian behavior. So if I say, Charles, what do you think of abortion? And Charles says, you're a fascist. Does he have to answer my question? It's over for me, man. Now, if I say, Charles, what do you think of abortion? And Charles says, Daniel, I hate you. Well, now he's confessing to unchristian behavior. And rather than to do that, he just go call me a name. That's why I said, listen, Orwell says, words are weapons. But traditionalists, and I guess I don't like the word, but they can put us in the camp with the traditionalists because we are in with the tradition of the Word of God. It says traditionalists are yet to discover effective countermeasures. Not these. We know how to fix these folk. Huh? It's like Jesus. He said, the thief cometh. We know he's coming. You wait by the window with a bat. All right. It's true a small slice of America's elite before and during the Great Depression became complicit in what French author Julien Benda called the treason of intellectuals. They despised the Christian capitalist in America in which they lived. But why did the cultural traitors take root in Middle America? Why did they attract a following among the children of the greatest generation that defeated Hitler? Why did so many of the young buy in? Was America morally adrift in the 60s, searching for something to believe in, a new way to live? Why were the timbers of the old house rotten? Why was this revolution inevitable? We're going to stop there. These are questions we can think about. Why was there a generation that was so ripe to be picked by these guys? We're going to read from Thomas Sowell. Chapter 4, called Assorted Dogmas. Now, a lot of you that got kids in school, you're going to recognize some of this stuff. And some of you are going to be concerned, and some of you ain't going to get it. Among the many dogmas prevailing in the American education, and this is all part of the same agenda. Again, what is the role of Antichrist, or the role of the church? To withhold Antichrist, to oppose Antichrist, to hinder literally the agenda of this, what Paul refers to as the mystery of iniquity. What is the mystery of iniquity? Why is iniquity a mystery? See, iniquity is a fancy word for that inner evil that drives a man. Surely the Lord has borne our, what? He says our sorrows, right? But what else did he do? Carried our grief and sorrows, but what did he do? What else did he do? You read Isaiah 53, right? He not only died for our sins, but also for our iniquity, which literally is that innate human evil that we all possess. This is something we all have. He is saying that this is a mystery. Now, why is it a mystery? Is it because it's hidden from us? Is it because we don't see it? Is it because we can't identify it? Why is it a mystery? Hey, was it a mystery once God told the devil there's coming one of the seed of a woman? Was there a mystery there? He told him there's going to be a virgin birth. He told him Jesus was coming. That wasn't a mystery to the devil. Why should it be a mystery to us? He's telling us how the devil operates, and we don't want to learn. It's a mystery of iniquity that's working in our midst, and our role as the church is to fight it. Now, if the mystery is broken, or if we have at least uncovered aspects of this iniquity through which the Antichrist operates, how come the church don't say nothing? Among the many dogmas prevailing in American education, most can be divided into two broad categories: dogmas about society, dogmas about education. The most widespread of the social dogmas revolve around multicultural diversity, and the educational dogmas include relevance, educating the whole person. The general de-emphasis of authority. Not all these dogmas are exclusively American. Some have gotten a foothold in educational system in some other countries, usually with the same disastrous consequences in the United States. Multicultural diversity. Few catchphrases have even been so uncritically accepted or so variously defined as multicultural diversity. Sometimes it refers to the simple fact that people from many racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds make up the American population. At other times, it refers to an agenda of separatism in language and culture, a revisionist view of history as a collective grievance to be kept alive, and a program of both historical and contemporary condemnation of American society and Western civilization. So he basically is saying to us, and again, this is Thomas Sowell, what is multicultural diversity? What does that mean? I mean, really, what does it mean? That depends on who's using it. See, this is why I tell you, the devil utilizes language better than the Christians. This is why my complaint has always been why people don't say exactly what they mean. When God says something, he wants us to understand it. He doesn't want it to be vague. He doesn't want it to be up for grabs. That's why when we read the parable of the four soils, Jesus made it plain. They said, Jesus, tell us about the kingdom. He says, okay, I'll tell you about the kingdom. A man went out to sow seed. Some fell on the wayside. Some fell among thorns. Some fell in stony ground. But some fell on good soil. What did Jesus say? That 1 out of 4 was going to respond to the seed of the word. Any questions? Jesus, can you tell us about the kingdom of God? Yes. And if you understand this parable, you'll understand all of them. What was he trying to tell us? I got a parable that if you understand this one, you'll understand everything. A man went out to sow seed, and it landed on 4 types of soil. One had rocks in it, didn't produce. The wayside, uncultivated, untilled soil, didn't produce. The birds ate the seed. It was unfruitful. Then he's got another type of soil that he says has stony ground. And that stony soil basically becomes unproductive also. That stony soil, he says, basically starts to root up and it starts to look like it's growing. But as far as having root, it can't penetrate the rocks. So when the sun comes up, what does he say happens? It scorches it. So this is that type of person who the gospel comes to. And immediately they respond and they look like pretty little Christians until the heat gets turned up, and because their life has never taken root, or because there are so many stones in their heart, the root of the word cannot take hold, and immediately that seed dies, literally dries up and dies. And all of that pretty Christianness that was once displayed suddenly disappears. Not to return, by the way. Then he talks about that soil. He says that is surrounded by thorns, or that it's got weeds in it. And the seed falls in there, and the seed starts to grow. But it grows among thorns, it grows amongst weeds. And it says that the weeds eventually grow up and choke the word, and the word becomes unfruitful. So far, 3 soils, they ain't no good, right? 3 soils ain't going to make it. Then he finally says, but some fell on good ground that brought forth some 30, some 60, some 100-fold. So that was 1 out of 4 soils. Any questions? Did Jesus mean what he said? How come people get bent out of shape about that? Somebody says, that ain't fair. We're not talking fairness. Where's equity in God? Why are you looking for it? Why does he call some and not others? What's it to you? If he called you, you ought to be thanking God. You ought to be dancing during worship services. You ought to be the one with your hands raised up screaming. God says what he means. Christians are the only ones that don't say what they mean anymore. You trying to tell me that the good Muslim, that a good practicing Muslim, the good family man Muslim, you trying to tell me if he doesn't accept Jesus, he's going to hell? Yes. But see, nobody wants to say that anymore. Christians look at you and say, well, before I answer that, let me just tell you this. I'm not the judge, God is. Well, don't you know what he said? Don't you know what the judge said? He said there's no other name under the heavens where man can be saved. It's solely through Jesus. Apart from that regeneration of Christ in the Word, there is no salvation. Church is the only, I said, the church is the only institution that teaches and preaches that cannot command language. We're afraid. The church has become no different than many of these institutions because it adopts the language of the world rather than the language of God. That's why sin now has relevance. Where did that come from? Where did that whole idea of relevance come from? Huh? Well, what's multiculturalism? What does that mean? And what does that have to do with God? me ask you a question. How'd that sneak its way into our school system? Listen, my kid don't go to school to learn multiculturalism. They go to school to learn how to read, write, and do math. All that political stuff, all that social stuff, that's me. That's my house. Why suddenly is the greatest thing for kids to learn in school multiculturalism? Huh? My kid goes to school and it's like, oh, today we're eating Chinese food. What for? Why? Oh, it's Italian Day. What for? Oh, we're having Taco Day. It's Mexican Day. Why? Hey, I'm not making this up. This is what happens at schools. Oh, we're dressing like various cultures. I remember Dr. Price. You know, he wants to wear his African robe. He says, this is Culture Day. Remember those? What am I supposed to do? Wear a serape and a sombrero? Couple 6 guns? Or a bag of Fritos? Huh? What's the white boy do? Huh? I don't know what he does. So multiculturalism basically is set in place as a program of both historical and contemporary condemnation of American society and Western civilization. So by promoting multiculturalism in this country, what are you doing to Americanism, or what are you doing to our Western culture? Hey, listen, let's not be stupid. All right, listen, let's not be stupid. I am extremely proud of my heritage, man. I'm brown, I can't hide it. I got this crazy Indian hair. That's how come I got to put crap in it just to keep it there. All right? I'm extremely proud of my heritage, but you know what? It means nothing in Christ. Amen. God put me here in this country 250 miles north because there's a destiny for Manasseh. There's a destiny for God's people here, and I'm counted as part. I don't need to go anywhere and have tacos and have white people make me tacos to show me that they are in tune with diversity. Huh? I'm extremely proud of my heritage, but you know what? I've been to Mexico, and I've been here, and this is better. Somebody says, you shouldn't say that. It is. Somebody says, I'm Italian. You ever been to Italy? Huh? Everybody talks about how romantic the canals of Venice. You know what they do in that water? Huh? Somebody says, oh, the beauty of France. They need to give that whole place soap. Oh, but we're out here preaching diversity. Huh? Oh, the German farmers and the German ingenuity. So why'd they lose the big one? Huh? Diversity and Cultural Diversity Day. What for? And how'd that stuff get into school? How'd that stuff become part of education? What does that have to do with reading, writing, and doing math? And what is the purpose of that? Despite frequent chameleon-like changes in the meanings of multiculturalism, its basic components are 3. So if you got a pencil and paper, write these down. To set an ideological belief about society and the world. To set a political agenda to make these beliefs the basis for the curriculum of the whole education system. Number 3, a set of beliefs about the most effective way to conduct an educational system. Many critics of multiculturalism, such as former Secretary of Education William Bennett, have done a battle over the ideological beliefs of multiculturalism. What is most salient educationally, however, is the attempt of multiculturalists to make these beliefs a new orthodoxy to be imposed institutionally by the political authorities. By the way, did any of you hear what they're doing at high schools in Colorado? They don't want to play the national anthem anymore. They're playing the world anthem. What kind of crap is that? Them Colorado people, they're screwed up, man. They can't even solve a murder up there. I better keep cool here, huh? They're having graduations. They don't play the national anthem. They play the international anthem. What kind of stuff is that? Anyway, the ideological component of multiculturalism can be summarized as a cultural relativism which finds prominence of Western civilization in the world or in the schools intolerable. So the whole idea of this cultural relativism literally makes Western civilization intolerable. Somebody said, look what America does. It squashes everybody's culture. It doesn't squash culture. People come here and they abandon it. People don't come to this culture and get their culture squashed. They come here, see the chicks and like the music, and they abandon what they brought from their country. Huh? This is what trips me out about some of these folk. I remember having an anthropology class in college, and I remember they got these white folk go out and dig in the desert and find baskets. And then they come over to the same descendants of those people and say, look, this is what your ancestors used to make. Why don't you all make them again? Huh? I used to hate that. For what? Come they don't bring you a computer? Huh? I'm going to tell you something. Look, I don't like what happened to the Native American. I don't like the idea that, the Europeans came over and, even the brutal things they put them through. I look at that stuff and say, man, that was wrong. Lie to them, put them on reservation. But you're crazy if you don't understand that was destiny. You feel bad for the American Indian? I do. I don't like what happened to him. Am I going to fight against it? No. You feel bad? Do you feel bad for the Philistines? Huh? Y'all feel bad for the Philistines when God told the children of Israel, go into the land and possess it? Huh? Do you feel bad for the Philistine when God said go in there and kill all the men, women, and children? Do you feel bad for the Philistines? The ideological component of multiculturalism can be summarized as a cultural relativism which finds the prominence of Western civilization in the world or in the schools intolerable. Behind this attitude is often a seething hostility to the West, barely concealed even in public statements designed to attract wider political support for the multicultural agenda. Such attitudes or opinions exist and are expressed by the same people that are expected to be in a free society. It is not these beliefs as such that are the real problem. The real educational problem is the attempt to impose such views as a new orthodoxy throughout the educational system, not only by classroom brainwashing, but also by institutional power, expressed in such things as compulsory indoctrination programs for teachers, making adherence to multiculturalism a condition of employment, and buying only those textbooks that reflect multiculturalism in some way, even in those textbooks like mathematics and science. Some or all of these patterns can be found in public schools across the United States, in leading American colleges, and in the educational institutions as far away as Britain and Australia. In all these settings, what the general public sees are not the ideological foundations of the institutional mechanisms of multiculturalism, but only their educational arguments. These arguments fall into a few standard categories. Number one, multiculturalism is necessary to enable our students to participate in the emerging global economy. And I'm not going to tell you what I wrote in the margin, but it rhymes with bullspit. Because this is why they tell you need it. Multiculturalism is necessary to enable our students to participate in the emerging global economy. Wait a minute. Who said we're going to go into a global economy? And who's leading that way? And how about them nations in the globe that don't want to participate in global economy, like the Arabs? Anybody tell them they're going to be part of a global economy? That's probably why they're getting bombed. Number two, multiculturalism is necessary because an increasing diverse population in the United States requires and demands education in a variety of cultures. Listen to the weenies these people are producing. You know what they're saying? That if you're brown, you can't learn like normal kids. You got to have some multiculturalism twist or bent in it just so you can keep up. If you're black, you're all just too dumb, and you need some multicultural twist in your education to help you along. Right? You need a professor to teach you in Ebonics, right, Whitney? You just ain't going to understand it like normal kids, right? That's why we got to be multicultural. Let me ask you this. I know there's a lot of Hispanic kids in L.A., but how many Hispanic kids in L.A.? Now, there's a bunch of them that come in from across the border. But for the most part, most of the Hispanic kids that are here were born here. Now, they're born here. Why do they need somebody talking Spanish just to teach them math, reading, and history? That's just foolishness. Intergroup relations are better when people are introduced to each other's cultures in school. Let me ask you a question, man. When you teach your kid at home to respect human beings, to respect people, I mean, do you sit there and say, no, you respect people only if they're black. Respect people only if they're white. Respect people only if they're red. So they say multiculturalism. You know, we got to have social groups represented. And we have to introduce other people's culture so you can understand it. Let me ask you this. Man, you're in America. Why do you need to understand how an Iraqi lives? Huh? I'm troubled by that. That's why I say my kid don't need to know Chinese Day. They ain't going to China. You know, I had a calendar. I was tripping on this calendar because I'm looking at this calendar and it says 4th of July and you go, oh, that's cool, that's American. And it said Australian Armistice Day, Belgian, so-and-so day. What do I care? You see one of those two? What do I care? Huh? Guatemalan independence. So what? I mean, unless you're playing trivia games, who cares? Somebody says, Brother Daniel, you're being awfully insensitive to these other folk. These folk got nothing to do with me here. Number 4. You'll love this one. In fact, I had a special word for this one. Education itself is better when presented from various perspectives, derived from culturally different social groups. In other words, America can't teach its kids if it doesn't have some other country's flavor in it. Let me get this straight. We put a guy on the moon because there was some Chinese or Iranian or Indian guy in NASA, right? We were one of the first nuclear nations because of diversity, multiculturalism. We're the richest nation on the planet. We throw away more food than some countries have. And all that happened, why? Because we're multicultural. What kind of lies are these? Now let me ask you the question. Now listen, this stuff is what's being taught in school today. Where did it start? Back then. You're starting to get a feel for why God hates the Antichrist? And what's the church supposed to be doing? The church is supposed to be screaming. But what's the church doing? The church is playing multiculturalism. That's right. I mean, the church is rolling over faster than a hooker in Hong Kong. Why? Suddenly the church is having multiculturalism day. Huh? Church wants to be, why does the church need to be multicultural? The only culture we need to embrace as a church is the culture of Jesus. Church wants to play games. We want to be multicultural too. Hey, doesn't that remind you of what happened when Israel gets into the land of promise? And God is literally the patriarch of all Israel. But the people said, now that we settled in the promised land and we see the nations around us, they all have a king, but we don't. Wait a minute. You got God, the creator of the earth, the creator of all things living. They got some fool human king, and you want to be like them? Because see, this is what happens. Israel had God as their king, but they said, we feel a little strange. People going to look at us funny. We want to be like them so they don't make fun of us. We want to be like the world. And you know the church doesn't want to be outcast. The church doesn't want to look foolish. The church doesn't want to look like some weirdo out there floating around in the fringes. So the church says, we're no different than you are. We're the same. And so the church embraces this stuff. You know, nobody wants to talk about marriage and divorce in church. You know why not? Because there's too many married and divorced people in church. Listen, this is a small group here. How many people been married before? Raise your hand. Holy smoke. I better not say nothing. You see what happens? Now somebody says, well, what you think of divorce? God said don't do it. God said it's wrong. God said keep your covenant. I don't need to tell you what it does to your kids. A lot of you know by looking at them what divorce did to your kids. People say, oh, my kid's so well adjusted. Your kid's screwed up. You just don't know it yet. You're the only one that don't know it. Everybody else knows it. They just don't tell you nothing. Huh? God said don't do it. But no preacher wants to say that. Why? If you've had a wife before, raise your hand. Divorce. Raise your hand if you've been divorced before. Look at that. Now look. I know you people are a little more intelligent than to know that I'm just out to beat the daylights out of somebody who's been divorced. I don't need to tell you God don't like it. You already know that. But what if I decide to just sit there and read from God's word what the purpose and what the will of God was concerning marriage? If I told you what God's original intent was with a wife, how the role of the man or the role of the patriarch was to take that woman, and your job was to protect her because you took her from her daddy's house and you gave her your baby, and that your role was to keep her for the rest of your life. If I was to take the word of God and just pound that and pound that and pound it, y'all wouldn't come back. Now, nobody wants to talk about that today because our culture now is a culture of divorce. We got more couples that get divorced than stay married. So we have a divorce culture. So preachers don't want to touch on this stuff because their people will get offended. And so preachers get up and they preach about relationships. And they preach about everything except what God has desired. They just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about bring up a child in the way he should go. And when he's old, he will not depart. Nobody wants to talk about that because half the people don't got time to raise their kids. You know, even Christian parents, they don't sit down and teach their kids the things of God. They leave it for somebody else. Listen, I'm telling you what happens when you leave education to teachers. Your kid's going to come home and question every value you ever laid out for him. In 1991, a commission report prepared for the New York State Commissioner of Education referred to the need for preparing young people to participate in a world economy. It was echoing a familiar theme in multicultural literature, yet neither argument nor evidence was offered to show the particular things were being done as part of multicultural agenda would accomplish that purpose. It would be hard to think of a more monocultural, insular, and self-complacent nation than Japan. Yet the Japanese are among the leading participants in the international economy. Now listen, you all know about the Japanese. They hate everybody. Huh? Now, Japanese are isolated like the U.S. was before the war. Aren't they greater participants in the world economy than most of the nations? Brings up a good point. Perhaps the most tendinous aspect of the claim that ethnic diversity requires multicultural education is the assertion that this demand comes from the various ethnic groups themselves. Did black people really go to the educational system and say, we want more blacks in education? Did Hispanics go crying to the education board and say, we want more brown people teaching? Chinese people, we want more Chinese representation as teachers? Did they ever do that? Hey, listen, I was reading Sports Illustrated. That'd be a month ago. And I'm disturbed because I went to a high school out here where we were known as the Chiefs. And I was part of that football team, so there was a tremendous pride with even the emblem of the chief. We used to beat the crap out of people just for defacing it. And we weren't even that type of Indian. I was kind of disturbed when I found out they were going to change the name. You all know what's going on. If you got a name like Chiefs, Braves, Indians, or something like that, white people are going around telling people that the Indians are so offended, we need to change the names of these mascots because all we're doing is putting them down. Well, Sports Illustrated did a poll, and they asked some of these Indian chiefs what they thought of that, and like 81% of them said, we like it. So the Indians liked it. Then they asked white people what they thought, and they said, oh, it's offensive. Now, they're still removing the names of some of these teams. Why? Because they don't care what these ethnics think. They're going to bulldoze their opinion over them anyway. It drives me crazy listening to these fools. Non-English speaking parents, for example, generally seek to get their children to be taught in English rather than a foreign language. You know, it's funny because even with this whole idea of bilingual education, after they passed that proposition, they found out that these Hispanics actually are scoring higher on tests now without bilingual education. They found out immersion works. That's why I'd be upset if I was black and found out people want to make Ebonics part of the educational system. Can you imagine? Repeat after me. I be, he be, you be, we be, they be. Huh? We got to talk to you like this so you can learn. Yeah, we finna learn something. What an insult that is on anybody that's black. And then you teach them to talk like that, and when they talk like that to white people look at them like, you stupid. You know what I'm saying? Asian Americans as well as Hispanics have found in polls that they prefer to have their children educated in English. Bilingual activists have had to resort to pressure and deception to maintain enrollments in bilingual programs. Multiculturalists themselves are quite clear that they do not see their philosophy as just one of many philosophies that different people may entertain or something that may be optional in some parts of school curriculum. Multicultural perspectives should infuse the entire curriculum from pre-kindergarten to 12th grade. According to the official report of the New York Commissioner of Education, because this report was considered the commitment to multicultural social studies education, that it was crucial, it called for an extensive staff development that would address attitudes, that is indoctrination, which would extend even to the school's clerical staffs and bus drivers. In short, the call for cultural diversity is a call for ideological conformity. Okay, so let's just deal with this idea of multicultural diversity. It's a philosophy. It's an ideal. Somebody says, if you come from a different background, if you have a different ethnicity in America, listen to the language. You are substandard and different, thus you need somebody to step down and help you. Huh? You cannot learn like normal people. Listen, that's what that says. That's like that argument. I hate to hear it. They say, minorities, they don't test well. You ever heard? Raise your hand if you've heard that. Those tests were not developed for minorities. If you want to be a police officer, what do you have to do? How about if you want to be a nurse? How about a driver's license? How about a doctor? What about a lawyer? Is there anything in life where you don't have to take a test? Does it matter what color you are? You don't got to take a test to sell oranges. You just got to know what off-ramp to stand at. These ideas are foolish. Now let me ask you this. Understanding these things, understand these are philosophical agendas that have an end, In other words, by introducing these ideas of multiculturalism, where are these ideals leading us? Huh? One world globalism. What is the agenda of this multiculturalism? To entertain the thought that we are moving toward globalization. Now, globalization, we are moving, in fact, toward that. But what is the purpose, or why is the world even moving toward globalization? Because the world is headed toward a time when it will be ruled by the Antichrist. And the Antichrist cannot establish a position unless we are in a place where it can be easily globalized. So would you agree that these ideas of multiculturalism are nothing more than one of the steps in the mystery of iniquity that the church should be resisting? Now, see, this is hard because, if you're brown, you're going to get put on the frying pan when brown people say, come on, Brother Daniel, ain't you down with the cause? The white man stole Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas from General Santa Anna under duress and torture. We're going to take it back. Are you with us? Hell no. I ain't with you. Somebody says, Brother Daniel, we're black separatists. And we feel that we're being unjustly treated by Whitey. And we just want our own dignity and our own space. Are you with us? What's my answer? Hell no. What are we doing? What are we doing? Why are we fighting? Huh? Then you got the extreme white people, huh? You got these people, these white people, they're saying, hey, we're being outnumbered. We're going to take the Northwest. Let the black folk have the city. We're going to the Northwest. We want our own white country. What is that about? Now listen, if you understand that these are just nothing more than ideals and plots that are leading us to the place where the Antichrist can take over, how come the church ain't saying nothing? Bilingual education. And I'm not even going to tell you what it rhymes with, what I wrote in this. The theory behind bilingual education is that youngsters who don't understand English can best be taught school subjects in their native language. I agree with that if you live in that country. Right? If you're a kid in China, you better learn in Chinese. Listen, let's be honest, man. If a kid grows up in the barrio and he gets taught in Spanish, does he master the English language? No. So what kind of job can he get? I'll tell you what kind. I don't mind telling you. I know what kind of jobs they get. They're the jumpsuits at the end of the car wash. Am I telling the truth? When you're in the supermarket shopping and you drop, a can of soda and it spills on the floor, what do you hear over the microphone? Jesus, aisle 7, clean up. Jesus. Right? Now the white guy comes up to you in the restaurant and says, good afternoon, what can I get you today? You hungry? Our specials are, but if you want water, what do they say? Jesus, agua, table sete. Right? Look, ain't that how it works in the am I lying to you? Is that how it works? Huh? When you're finished eating, does the white guy come and clean off the table? I went, we went out to a Japanese restaurant the other day, and there ain't nothing worse than messing up the atmosphere. We're walking to the table, you know how they walk you through the thing, and all of a sudden the kitchen door swings open, and I look in the kitchen, and they were all Mexicans. I'm eating Japanese food, man. I'm talking the sushi and the tempura and all that other stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to see some samurai back there with the ginzus, with the kamikaze headbands and the kimonos. The door swings open, I look in there, and it was all Mexicans. And I'm not talking about just brown-skinned folk. I'm talking about south of the border brothers. Undocumented aliens. Huh? You could have filled half the immigration bus. Now, how come they get to work in the back with the door closed, cooking Japanese food? You know why? Because they no habla. Huh? I'm not lying to you. How come Jesus that cleans your table don't get the tip? Huh? Because he no habla. Right? How come, Juan ain't the guy at the register at the car wash selling you them crummy $6 CDs and cheap air fresheners, taking your money? How come? Because he don't habla. Right? Or because he hablas. He don't habla inglés. But he got to be at the end of the car wash line with like 3 towels in his pocket. And the armor all clipped onto this pocket, and the window cleaner clipped onto that one. Huh? How come? Because some jackass decided that it is better to teach them subjects in their native language. Taking English classes as a separate subject rather than to be subjected to all English education from the first day. Because we don't want them to feel bad. The children of immigrants from Spanish-speaking countries have been the principal focus of bilingualism. But once the idea caught on in the political arena and in the courtrooms, it expanded to include school children of Asian, Middle Eastern, and other backgrounds, ultimately drew into its orbit the native-born American children whose only language was English. Well, how's that happen? While most bilingual programs have featured Spanish language, some have been Chinese, Armenian, Navajo, and more than 100 other languages. A landmark on the road to bilingualism was a 1974 U.S. Supreme Court decision in Leal versus Nichols that it was an unconstitutional denial of equal protection to provide only English language education to non-English speaking school children. Given the vision of the agenda of the ethnic activists, it is not of transitional programs to acquire English language skills, but rather a promotion of foreign language as a medium of instruction throughout the curriculum. Now listen, you and I both know this. They're not out necessarily to teach your kid in Spanish, but they're out to promote that it's okay to talk Spanish. Listen, I don't have any problem with people talking Spanish. But to go around telling people you don't need to learn English, you condemn them. Oh, you don't need to speak right, proper English. Telling black people that. You don't need to, as long as you can communicate. And then they tell you you're okay. Try to tell you how intelligent you are. But rather a promotion of foreign language as a medium of instruction throughout the curriculum, promotion of the study and praise of other aspects of the foreign culture in schools. And whether openly or avowed or not, promotion of a sense of historic grievances of American society, both on their own behalf and on behalf of other presumed victims of American Western civilization at home and around the world. Now, the bottom line behind all of these agendas is to literally beat the West and beat them down to the extent that you make the West or Western civilization bad. Now, by the way, where's Western civilization come from? It comes from the Greco-Roman. Where did the Greco-Roman come from? Now, we already know that. This is from God's system. In short, the activist agenda goes well beyond the language of education, or even education in general, to encompass a political and ideological issue to be addressed at the public schools at the taxpayer expense. So your kid, you ever heard them say something like, there's a separation of church and state, and that they don't want you doing any kind of religious teaching in school? But they are. They're putting ideologies and philosophies into your kid. In short, maintaining or expanding enrollment in bilingual programs have clearly taken priority over educating children. Moreover, the deception common in other programs promoted by zealots has also been common in bilingual programs. District administrators interviewed by the San Francisco Examiner downplayed the number of black students assigned to bilingual classes, first estimating the number at 3, an estimate subsequently raised to about 100, though the real figure turned out to be more than 750. A civil rights attorney representing minority children characterized the whole approach as a mindless practice of assigning kids wherever there's space. It is not wholly mindless, however, for children whose parents are poor, less educated, and less sophisticated to be more likely assigned to remain in bilingual programs. So here's what it means. If you dumb parents and permit it, you deserve it. More vocal white parents manage to maneuver their kids out of bilingual classes, as the civil rights attorney noted. Let's leave bilingualism alone for a minute. You know what? We're going to save affirmative action. Save it for another time. Miscellaneous psychobabble. The idea that one should teach the whole child goes back as far as John Dewey. Today some call it child-centered education at the elementary school level and teaching the whole person in high school or in college. The idea of tailor-made education, varying with the social background and psychology of each student, is related to the notion of relevance. It is also reminiscent of an idea popular among some ambitious economists that they could fine-tune the economy until embarrassing experience taught them that they were lucky to get the right channel. Ambitious educational goals seldom seem to evoke the question as to whether or not we have the capability of achieving them. Nor are these ambitious noticeably moderated by educational system. Their abysmal failure at teaching the most basic skills. We know that's true. Educators who have repeatedly failed to do what they are hired to do, that are trained to do, should take on sweeping roles, more so than these amateur psychologists and sociologists. There's only one way to deal with the whole person, and that is superficially. Now, some of you have had some background on this if you've taken some of these sociology courses. Let me just read one paragraph before we close. While school children in Japan are learning science, mathematics, and foreign language, American schools offer their children, sitting them in circles, unburdening their psyches and expressing themselves on scientific, economic, and military issues for which they lack even the rudiments of competence. Worse than what they're not learning is what they are learning, presumptuous superficiality taught by practitioners of it. Let's leave that. Where's the stuff? What is the rationale behind these things? Why would you do these things? Why would these people do these things? Why is this the norm? Why is this the rule rather than the exception? What is the role of the church? To literally oppose, to hold back and to hinder Antichrist. The problem is that the church has never understood why Paul calls it the mystery of iniquity that is even now present. We just sit back quiet and watch all of these things unfold. And what's worse is even as Christians, we embrace it. Now, here's what one of the biggest problems are. Especially like in a church like ours, we've got a lot of people with color on their skin. The problem is that for the longest time, we have not only been exposed to these ideals, but some of us even jump on the bandwagon. We've become proponents of these ideals, thinking that it was something good for our people, when in essence all it did was screw us. Yep. Somebody comes along and tells you, you know, your kid would do a lot better in school if they teach him in Spanish. No, he won't. Your kids will do better in school if they teach him Ebonics. No, they won't. Your kid will do better in school if they stop testing them. No, they won't. They will not be prepared for life. Your kids need to learn to deal with issues. No, they don't. Because kids really don't have issues. Adults do. And adults project them on kids. We come up to kids and ask them, are you stressed out? What stress? You know, you can put a kid through a stressful situation. 10 minutes later, he's ready for ice cream. Huh? Where'd this stuff come from? Huh? I'll tell you, the church has sat back on its hands for so long that it has not changed a single thing in the history of our country, probably in the last 100 years. Listen, about the only thing close was those stupid, silly women who called themselves the Christian Women's Temperance Alliance, who decided they got tired of their husbands drinking and decided to march en masse once they had this power to vote and say, we want alcohol to be prohibited. That time in our nation's history called prohibition. You open up the history book and you say, what did these Christians do? They caused America to go dry for a little bit. But what in essence did they do? Christian women, what they do? They said, no more drinking. As a result of America going dry for even that short period of time, what happened? Organized crime came out of that. Huh? Isn't that from where the mob came from? Look, if you look at it, suddenly you got, speakeasies open underground, bootlegging, millions of dollars coming through. The Kennedy family. Huh? What happened? They ruined this nation single-handedly. What are Christians famous for in American history? The witch hunts. Huh? Think about it. Christians were so afraid of witches, they started burning them. When you look at the history of our nation, what change or what has the church actually done? Think about it. Nothing more than isolated itself. It hadn't done anything.